Robert, we're doing Project Veritas, and we got a few more to go.
Yeah.
Speaking of a court getting defamation wrong, I'll give you the backdrop. I haven't done one in the car in a while because I would have spent 5 hours on one story, which would have been the Project Veritas judgment. And it would have been the one story that I did in a day, and it's not an efficient use of time anymore. Project Veritas, for all of those who don't know, they have a very good batting record when it comes to suing, defending, and defending themselves. They are suing the New York Times for defamation, for the allegations of having run a coordinated disinformation hit piece as relates to alleged ballot harvesting from Ilhan Omar's campaign. We won't get into that for now. They sued CNN because at one point when they were banned from Twitter, from their ever so clear, uniformly applied rules, Twitter said that they broke the terms of service. They violated terms of service as relates to publishing private information and or misinformation, because you lump it all together in one opaque coverall rule. You never know what's going on. The story itself, from what I understand, was when they approached a Facebook executive in front of his house. They didn't bleep out the number of his address. They were banned from Twitter. CNN runs a piece saying they were banned from Twitter for providing misinformation. Okay. Project Veritas sues for defamation, saying we weren't banned under the pretext of disinformation. We were banned under the pretext of having allegedly not censored private information, therefore disclosed private information. And they said, therefore, your factual statements, which you said to your viewers, that Project Veritas communicates, publishes misinformation, factually incorrect, and impugns our reputation. CNN, true to form, makes a motion to dismiss, saying they raised a bunch of arguments. There's no actual malice because they're a public figure. The statements were substantively true, if sufficiently so that they should fail on the motion. But the argument that they raised, which the judge clung to, was that it was sufficiently true because while we were factually incorrect in saying that they were banned for providing misinformation, they were banned for providing private information, which, as far as a journalist goes, has the same negative impact on the damage to the reputation. And the judge, applying law that I never knew existed until I read this judgment, said, almost verbatim, substitute the false for the true, and the damage to the reputation is the same. As if to say, okay, fine. They did not provide misinformation, but they violated the terms of service as relates to private information. So substitute the false, that they published misinformation, with the true, that they provided private information. The damage to their reputation would be the same. Therefore, it's immunity from defamation because the truth would have been as damaging as the lie. Robert, we'll get into the fact that I think that's fundamentally wrong as relates to the two allegations. But in law, is that actually the law? That, like, all right, you accuse someone of being a rapist and not a murderer, when in reality they're only a murderer but not a rapist, and therefore, the lie, substitute the lie for the truth. It would be just as bad calling someone a murderer versus a rapist, and you can't sue for defamation?
That's not my understanding. I think the court confused an issue about limitation on damages, an argument against damages to the jury, with an argument about whether you can substantively sue in the first place. The court admitted CNN lied about Project Veritas and then said, but if they told the truth, I don't think you would have suffered any greater damage than them lying about you. And aside from the fact that claim itself, of course, is inaccurate in my opinion, more consequently, that isn't my understanding of the law. Now, the court was a federal court sitting in Georgia applying New York law, which the reason for that was the court interpreted that the domicile of the plaintiff controls, which the courts have been inconsistent on that. It's interesting, though, CNN raised the choice of law defense, because to my knowledge, they never did raise that defense in Kentucky in the Nicholas Sandman cases, because I thought that was a risk for the Sandman cases, particularly because they were brought in federal court. That the D.C. law would apply rather than Kentucky substantive law, and there were some provisions in D.C. law that are less sympathetic to the plaintiff. in a defamation suit. But here, CNN did argue that, most likely because Georgia law wasn't sympathetic to them at all. But generally, defamation law is standardized. So I see this as a misinterpretation of New York law that is really about limitations on potential damages arguments to the jury, because the argument to the jury is if we told the truth, they would have suffered the same injury. Okay, that's a damages argument. That's not a substantive did they lie about me argument. That's not substantial truth. Interpreting that as substantial truth makes no sense. It's a court misapplying the concepts at a conceptual level. Not a huge surprise. This was an Obama appointee. So I think that was... Now, the other problem was this. Factually saying you would suffer the exact same injury by a journalistic organization like Project Veritas being falsely accused of misleading people versus whether or not they disclose private information is also a frankly nonsensical argument by the court. That there's nobody that would say, okay, you're a journalist, which is going to... are you going to suffer the exact same reputational injury if you're accused of lying to the world such that you had to be banned from social media versus you disclose private information about somebody? That it's ludicrous to compare those two.
So I'm going to read it just so nobody thinks I'm just making crap up. Robert, you see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. While Project Veritas asserts that CNN's statements implying that Project Veritas was banned from Twitter for spreading misinformation maligns its, quote, journalistic integrity. That's from their document. That's from their filing. The pleaded truth of being accused of violating a policy aimed at protecting individuals from coming to physical harm as a result of their information being shared, end quote, similarly maligns a journalist's professional reputation. In essence, this is what I was saying. Substitute the true for the false, and the damage to the plaintiff's reputation would be no less. And they cite this decision, which I have no idea what it is.
And note that decision says, it talks about damages. It's not saying you can't bring a libel claim on that basis. It says the damages would be no less. Right. It's a mitigation argument on damages. That's not a substantive basis to dismiss and calling it substantially true. I mean, this federal court actually said that a substantially false statement was substantially true. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, here this just says, however, without more, the court is unable to uphold Project Veritas' policy argument as the Supreme Court has recognized that there can be times when alleged false speech is insulated from liability. Because and I was saying this, I'm going to close this and hopefully I don't shut myself out. Did I do it? I'm still here. To say that, I don't remember where I said this. It might have been privately. To accuse a journalist of providing misinformation is much different to the integrity, to the reputation of that journalist than to accuse them of releasing private information. Saying that they committed a crime of hacking is different than saying they committed the journalistic crime of lying or providing misinformation. One might make them an a-hole. The other might make them a liar. And when you're a journalist, you can still be a good journalist and a big a-hole, but you can't be a good journalist if you're a big liar but not an a-hole. And so to me, that's like, okay, that's a great determination. That's for the jury. How do you use that on a motion to dismiss to say, I concur, I agree? When they said you were booted from Twitter for misinformation, it was factually incorrect. But had they told the truth that you were booted for communicating private information, the damage to your reputation would have been the same, dismissed on a motion to dismiss, not on damages at a hearing after the merit. It made no sense to me. We'll see if they appeal. Do you think they should appeal? I mean, what are the chances of if they do?
I'm sure they'll appeal. It'll just be who they get a draw on the 11th Circuit. But like I said, this does not sound like good law to me. This is a confusion of a damage mitigation claim with a substantially true claim. I mean, all you have to keep saying is a federal court said something that was substantially false was substantially true. And he's like, okay, that can't make sense as a matter of fact or law.
Keep giving them hell, boys. Now, it's not us. It's Project Veritas. Project Veritas is giving them hell. Their victory of the week, above and beyond this, I'm reading this decision. I was like, all right, great. If you accuse me as a lawyer of being, what's the word when you steal funds from trust? Well, that's false. But if you accuse me of being, I don't know, I don't even want to say it. There are types of accusations when given your profession, the effect is entirely different, but that's for a hearing on the merits and not for a summary motion to dismiss, where they did score a small victory in that seizure of James O'Keefe and other journalists' cell phone records, cell phones, sorry, not cell phone records, where they petitioned to have a special master appointed, and they succeeded, which was the victory at the time. They had a special master come in who's an independent third party appointed by the court, not affiliated with either of the parties. The victory was in them getting that appointed, and I covered that at the time. Their sub-victory was that, I didn't know this, whoever the prosecution is says, okay, well, we got a special master appointed. Project Veritas should have to pay their fees to ensure that we don't, have access to information we're not entitled to. And it would have been like $45,000. It'd be, a reasonable fee for anyone who's not the government playing with other people's tax dollars. The court said basically, no, you're going to pay for the special master's professional fees and not James O'Keefe and the defendants. I mean, what is it? It's an obvious decision, but it's a Pyrrhic victory because it's just the taxpayers who pay for this.
Oh, I mean, it's a big victory because it could be difficult for Project Veritas to pay that kind of expenses, and that would be a real burden. So it's good that the government always has to bear the burden of the expense of a magistrate or a special master when they go in and, frankly, illicitly seize materials. So the fact the special master was assigned was important. The fact that the government has to write the check is important because otherwise it's the individual whose rights are being violated. So it was an important win for Project Veritas as to this matter and for other people that are similarly situated.
Well, we're going to see. Apparently, there's going to be news. Project Veritas is fighting the good fight. They had another retracto, which, I mean, it's at some point when you're up to your 400th retracto, it makes for good internet content, but the impact on the viewer is lessened. Robert, what else did we have on
the New York
menu?
Times had an issue of retraction because they accused someone who was being skeptical of the war of being pro-Putin, and the individual was most clearly not, and so they had to issue a retraction for it. But it gives a sense of the mindset. And to the super chat that said that Biden looks like the puppet from Jeff Dunham, I've been saying that from the beginning. Beginning a couple of years ago, he didn't used to, but I mean, he now completely looks like the Jeff Dunham old man puppet, cranky old man, just dimmer.